everyone who was part of the logistics of this incredible historical event. People before me rightly pointed out two things that I think should be elaborated a bit further. One, that it doesn't come naturally to say, why do you need a particular Jewish movement for justice in Palestine? Shouldn't it be an international humanist movement where it doesn't matter what is your gender, religion, or ethnicity? And the second point that is important that Rada mentioned, that this is not something that really involves the Palestinians directly, but something that can have an effect on the Palestinian just struggle for liberation and freedom. But I would go further than that. I would say it's not just an intra-Jewish discussion, rather. It's an intra-European discussion. You cannot at all, you cannot dissociate Europe's history, Europe's racism towards Jews, Europe's racism towards other people, Europe's complicity in inventing the idea of a Jewish state in Palestine, sustaining it and protecting it. Europe has to, and especially Western Europe, but not only Western Europe, has to ask itself, how did we arrive at this particular moment in 2025? And the answer is still the same answer, although we had already asked that question, people have asked this question 100 years ago. And it's the same answer. We are here because Europe thought it could not deal with its own racism towards Jews. And when racism toward Jews reached its climax in the Holocaust, one moment after the end of the Second World War, not one European politician, not one European intellectual in West, Central, and East Europe said to the Jews of Europe, come back to Europe. We will build together a Europe that is anti-racist, where Holocausts and any kind of racism towards other people would not happen. No, all the intellectuals of Western Europe, all the leaders of Europe came and said, we very much like an idea that we heard from Christian, evangelical Christianity and some Jewish intellectuals. Europe inherently cannot solve the Jewish problem. So we have a much better solution. We will build a Jewish state, a Western European Jewish state at the heart of the Arab world, at the heart of the Muslim world, at the expense of the Palestinians. And if you think that someone would come then, whether it's 1882 or 1945, and say to people, wait a minute, that doesn't even sound logical. Forget about morality. Forget about international law. Forget about justice. How does this sentence sound logical to you? That because you have a problem of racism, you are helping to colonize an Arab country, to dispossess it and Judaize it in the name of solving a European problem of racism. And this is why we need this conference. Not because we need a particular Jewish or Muslim or Christian group for Palestine. We need an international solidarity movement for the Palestinians with whoever has a modicum of humanity in them. But we need this particular discussion because it's the European Jewish complex that the Palestinians have to pay for. And they pay so dearly that now they are paying with the genocide of Gaza. And you would have thought that at least the genocide in Gaza would reopen this question for Europeans. Because for so many years, especially Western Europe, gave the Israelis the impression that they are organically connected to Western Europe. that they are part of the civilization of Western Europe, that they are part of the culture of Western Europe. It doesn't matter that geographically Israel is in the Middle East, culturally and organically it's Europe. And it's not just a superficial association such as the Eurovision or playing in European Football Association. It's far more than that. It's being the most important trade ally with Israel. It's buying weapons from Israel and selling weapons from Israel. But more than anything else, providing it is immunity, even when the worst crimes are committed by this state against the Palestinians. So those of you who are surprised about European political and cultural indifference to the genocide in Gaza, I suggest look at it as the ability of West Europe in particular, but not only West Europe, to look and accept that part of West Europe, or a society in West Europe, a state that belongs to West Europe, can commit genocide again after the Second World War. It was very easy to blame Russia with crimes that reminded people of the Second World War. But when organic part of Europe is doing it, Europe is silent. It gives immunity. And then we hear all the hypocrisy. So actually, this is the movement, first of all, of European Jews and ex-European Jews, who are absolutely right. We're not discussing it with Palestinians. We're discussing it with Europeans. We're discussing it with Americans. We said, if you want to help deal with your own past, with your own racism, you have to help us in the struggle for a free, decolonized, and democratic Palestine. And that is the only way, not for the sake of the Palestinians. That is the only way that you yourself will be able to deal with your current racism. That is not directed against Jews anymore, but is directed against Arabs and Muslims in the continent. That's the connection. I wish we had also many Arab Jews here. Because we have two communities of Jews that were manipulated as part of this European unwillingness to deal with racism through the dispossession of the Palestinian and imposing a European state at the heart of the Arab world and the Muslim world. One group were the European Jews themselves, who were induced to come to Palestine and were part of the colonization and dispossession of Palestine. But after 1948, another group of Jewish communities was manipulated, and these are the Jews of the Arab world, the Jews from North Africa, from Iraq, from Syria, from Iran. It's very difficult to have an Arab-Jewish anti-Zionist conference, unfortunately, because so many of these Jews subscribe to the worst kind of racism towards Arabs and Palestinians inside the state of Israel. But that doesn't mean we're giving up on that kind of discussion either. And I hope in another conference, in another meeting, we will have a particular stress also on the role of the Arab Jews in changing the reality that Zionism imposes on Palestine, on the region, and on the world. Now, there is another reason for this speaking here, I think, as well. Although many people rightly would say the key for stopping the genocide, the key for ending the dispossession of the Palestinian and the oppression of the Palestinian, the key lies in Washington. You hear it a lot. People would say, if you can change the American policy, then you can change the reality on the ground. There's more than one key, unfortunately. The Palestinians are facing a global alliance that is incredible, if you think about it, of different interests and different states and different ideologies that sometimes have nothing in common with each other, but are all believing that the European Jewish state at the heart of the Arab world, through the demolition of Palestine, serves their own interests. It could be an ideological interest, a theological interest, or an economic interest. But what is important that one of these allies, one of the most important allies, are the EU and other members of Western Europe. They are as important as the United States. If European governments would have taken a brave move today of sanctions, of stopping trade with Israel, of treating the state of Israel as a pariah state, this would have an immense effect on the situation in Palestine. This will not be a symbolic act that make people feel better. This would be an actual position that would save the lives of many Palestinians tomorrow and the day after. So we have a role, both as European and also as ex-European Jews, if you want, or Jews in Europe today. We have a role to explain to our political elites, to our mainstream media, that they have been complicit in the origins of this project that produced the genocide in Gaza, that they are complicit in the genocide itself, and they will be complicit if the genocide is allowed to continue. But on the other hand, we have to tell them, you have the power to end it. You're not here to be just judged and be morally accused. We are talking to you because you have effective means to change the reality. And of course, we know our politicians. And I'm not very optimistic about our ability to deal with particularly this kind of generation of politicians we have in Europe today, especially in Western Europe. Self-centered, very little caring for the interest of their own electorate. But nonetheless, we should continue the pressure, because these governments have the power not to change the reality in Palestine towards a total decolonization and freedom, but at least to stop the next stages in what becomes very clear an Israeli continued plan to use what they deem as a window of opportunity to wipe out Palestine as a nation, as a country, as a history. Civil societies are very important, and I'm sure that their struggle has an impact. And we can already see some of its impact on some of the governments. But it is not a problem outside of Europe. It's a problem inside Europe, because Europe dealt with its own problems through the colonization of Palestine and the dispossession of Palestine. I would have liked to say this is our first and last conference, but it will not. Unfortunately, we will probably need another conference, and I hope not more than 4 or 5, so that conference number 5, we would say we don't need it anymore. I want to end on an optimistic note, and I know it's very difficult to be optimistic nowadays, given what we see on the ground, and it would be unrealistic and irresponsible to tell the people of Gaza or the West Bank there are good news around the corner as far as you're concerned tomorrow or the day after. That would be irresponsible, it would be unrealistic. But those of us who are fortunate enough not to be the victims, the direct victims of this horrible Israeli inhumanity and brutality, have a role to think also strategically, not just tactfully for tomorrow. And looking strategically of what this particular state of Israel is doing to the Palestinians, to the region, to the world at large, it is very clear that it's digging its own hole. And there are processes, there are clear processes, and I'm not saying this as an activist, I'm saying this as a scholar. There are clear processes of disintegration of the Israeli Jewish society from within, of the deterioration of its economy, of the weakness of its military structure, of the isolation that Israel is experiencing in the world and among Jewish communities. These are very slow processes compared to the very quick pace of destruction on the ground. And our role as activists is to narrow the gap between the processes which are positive and the processes which are destructive. But do believe that you are part of a movement of change in history that is already occurring, that would eventually bring down a regime that is based on racism, apartheid, and dispossession, and is more than anything else a European regime. If we don't have a hope for bringing down a European regime of racism and apartheid, we have no hope for Austria, we have no hope for Germany, and we don't have hope for ourselves as humanity. And because we believe in humanity, every small step that we win in fighting injustice in our countries, in our European countries, in democracies and non-democracies, every small step, and there are small steps which we are winning, is a winning day for Palestine. Every failure is stopping the liberation and decolonizations. So let's be also focusing on these small steps and believe that we are part of something much more powerful, much more transformative, that is already happening. It's happening too slowly, and it's not enough, but it will happen. The question is not if, the question is when. And the question of when is very important for the Palestinians on the ground, who are still alive and are still suffering. So let's try and also make sure that we begin to understand the when and not the if. Thank you.